Hello, and welcome to this week's Movie Math, where once again our conversation turns to star power, or more specifically this week, lack of star power. Many of you claim that movie stars, no longer exist. But I think that while they're not as big a deal or as imperative to a movie's success as they once were, they're still one of the things that can power a film at the box office. I think the real change is that it's no longer you have to have a movie star. Now your star can be a big major franchise or cinematic universe, or it can be a big idea. But the two of the three new releases this week, and I think actually, all three releases, come to think of it, all three new releases didn't have something big going for them, be it a movie star or a brand. So very interesting development, and let's dive right in. I also have been talking to you guys about the fact that some actors just can't get outside of their, box office box, so to speak. Like, for instance, Ryan Gosling's films always open at around 11 million. There are occasional exceptions, but for the most part, this guy's amazingly reliable with his box office opening weekend numbers. And sure enough, Joseph Gordon-Levitt and Renee Zellweger were very consistent this weekend. Both of their films underperformed, but that was Hollywood being very optimistic and also hoping that inflation would help out, but it didn't. Both actors delivered box office openings right in line with what they usually do. We're going to start with Bridget Jones's Baby, because that did better of the two and was a little bit of a better situation than Snowden. Although I think that it's not total doom and gloom for either picture. But with Bridget Jones, this wasn't even really able to perform particularly well as a franchise. Now, it came in around where Edge of Reason came in, the second film from Bridget Jones, but that again doesn't account for inflation. It's been 12 years since that other movie came out. You can't deliver the exact same box office. I mean, not only has there been inflation, but ticket prices have gone up. However, it's worth noting that Bridget Jones has always been a franchise like 50 Shades, which is powered by the foreign market. As you can see from the division between foreign and domestic box office for the first two pictures, clearly we need to wait and see what's going to happen with this third picture in the same regard. It also debuted in third place, which is the exact same ranking that the first film came in at, and the second film even debuted in fifth place in the domestic box office. So it's not quite what Bridget Jones, the team, would have liked to have seen and what should have seen, but it's not a horrible embarrassment either. Also, speaking of embarrassment, it's a little bit of a win for Renee Zellweger, an actress who's dealing with plastic surgery. And because everybody was saying, oh, I can't look at Renee Zellweger, she looks disgusting. I'm surprised that everyone makes such a big deal about Renee Zellweger, but yet nobody talks about Meg Ryan. But anyway, Renee Zellweger was still able to do fairly well at the box office, and interestingly, 79% of the audience that showed up was female. So at least the girl code seemed to hold to some degree. All right, so that's the first big movie for the weekend, well, supposedly big. The second was Snowden. Now this was supposed to be a big idea, but that couldn't deliver. But I think that Edward Snowden, we've talked about it a little bit before, even on last week's Movie Math, that Edward Snowden never really made huge waves as even a public figure, when he actually did the whistleblowing, right? Like, Snowden's had trouble getting traction. Everybody knows who he is, but people don't want to pay attention to him, either from lack of interest or perhaps because they think that he's a traitor, and so they don't want to give him any extra attention. Because Citizen4 did very poorly at the box office, even worse than Snowden. But it did manage to win the Oscar for Best Documentary in 2015, and I'm not sure if that's going to help or hurt Snowden's chances. Obviously, the Academy feels it's an important story. Will they want to double down on rewarding it, or will they feel that they already did? This is an open road picture, and they had a breakthrough with their awards campaign office. Last year was Spotlight, winning Best Picture. That film also had a weak box office, and it didn't do particularly well at the media. It wasn't a real standout picture. Although I think this year the awards situation is a little bit more competitive. But anyway, With Spotlight, that had a much stronger Rotten Tomato score. It came in at 96%, whereas Snowden is currently sitting at 60. However, audiences liked Snowden, giving it an A cinema score, so there's a chance it could still win over Academy voters. But I think that at the end of the day, what you're really looking at here is that this is an idea that doesn't have a lot of traction, the idea of Edward Snowden, and there wasn't enough star power with the film to propel it any further. I mean, look at Tom Hanks playing Sully, right? I mean, that's a good match of an actor and a real-life figure. And Joseph Gordon-Levitt, who I think did just as good a job with his portrayal, just simply doesn't have the box office clout and fan base. And also Oliver Stone. Although Oliver Stone's never been a big box office guy, however, he's certainly been a lot more friendly with the media, but the media hasn't really pushed Snowden. So he's fallen out of favor a little bit. Joseph Gordon-Levitt never really was in favor, and that's resulted in a film that's in danger of slipping through the cracks. But we'll see. Don't be surprised if maybe it rears its head during awards season because of that interest in Snowden from the Academy and Open Road's track record. Also, Open Road not having a lot of pictures to push, so they have a lot riding on this. And then with star power, I said it also matters with brands. And that's when Blair Witch comes into play. Blair Witch vastly underperformed. You know, horror has done very well this summer, and people felt that Blair Witch would be able to ride the coattails of the summer horror box office, but it didn't. Maybe that's partially because of Don't Breathe, which we'll talk about at the end of this little section. But what I think is interesting is that Blair Witch might be too old to resurrect as far as a franchise goes. I mean, sometimes it works. Jurassic World, they were able to bring it back, you know, that brand. But, you know, Bridget Jones is having trouble coming back, and so is Blair Witch, two very old franchises that have been gone for perhaps too long. I would also say there's a chance that Blair Witch is the victim of its own success. It ushered in the found footage genre, but then Hollywood beat it into the ground, particularly with the Paranormal Activity movies. And I think that a lot of found footage films haven't been doing particularly well. So I think that part of the horror genre might have passed, that era. And now we're really into auteur horror filmmaking, thanks to James Wan, and his pictures are doing quite well, and also big twists. Now, Blair Witch, of course, was like also one of the original big twist films, but I think that Blair Witch, maybe there weren't any twists for the actual picture beyond it being, surprise, another Blair Witch movie. And they already gave that away when they they revealed it was not The Woods, but another Blair Witch film. I'm talking twists like in the recent Don't Breathe, and then also with M. Night Shyamalan's The Visit, which interestingly enough was also a found footage film, but it had a little bit better production values, and also that twist was such a big part of I think, the movie's success. So there are new kings in horror: James Wan, Jason Blum, Fede Alvarez, Sam Raimi with Fede Alvarez, and then even M. Night Shyamalan. We'll see how the upcoming Split does with James McAvoy. And then Rotten Tomatoes struck again, killing another movie, 36% for Blair Witch, whereas Don't Breathe has an 87% on Rotten Tomatoes. And if you had a horror itch this weekend, you still wanted to see Don't Breathe to scratch it, because Don't Breathe is still doing very well. Fourth weekend, fell only 32%. That's fantastic, and it's getting very close to that century mark. I don't know if it's going to make it to the century mark, but it's going to probably get at least within striking distance, and it's already way past the Evil Dead remake, which was the only other picture that Fede Alvarez has ever made. So this is looking very good for his career, and you know, he should be having another picture come into place pretty soon. There's a big break between Evil Dead and Don't Breathe. Let's see if he takes that long to return again. I think probably they expected more from the Evil Dead remake, but now I think he's finally delivered on the promise that he originally was supposed to have as a horror filmmaker. Then as for holds, Sully, also a fantastic hold, 37% in just its second weekend, holding extremely well, and will surely pass the century mark domestically, which will be the first time for a Tom Hanks picture since Captain Phillips. The pictures are very similar in their appeal, I think, although Sully opened about 10 million more than Captain Phillips. We'll see where it ends up in the long run. But as for Tom Hanks' overall career recently, he didn't have another century marked film domestically before Captain Phillips since Angels and Demons. So he's had a lot of films not be able to make it to the century mark. So it's very good that he had another one come, looks like it's going to come in there. I would also say that his other picks were all very good. Like we talked last week about an actor being in the right role. And I think that Bridge of Spies and Saving Mr. Banks were Tom Hanks-esque pictures. But I think that Sully is a flashier film. You know, it's got the big plane crash, right? Or forced water landing, as Sully insists that is said. So I think that this is proving, not only Sully, but all the way that the movies are performing at the box office, proving that with a couple of exceptions, like let's say Bad Moms, for the most part, since television is so good and there's so much television, that these days, while some people complain about there only being big ticket pictures at the multiplex, that's the only type of movie that most moviegoers are willing to pay movie theater ticket prices to see. So I think that if you want Hollywood to make smaller, more aggressive and inventive pictures, like Tom Hanks himself said at the Venice Film Festival when he was talking about La La Land, the real test is whether or not the mainstream audience will support those pictures at the box office. So if you don't want to just see big tentpole pictures or big flashy pictures at your local multiplex, you have to pay to see those other films. So it'll be interesting to see, Tom Hanks kind of threw down the gauntlet, so to speak, and so we'll see how mainstream audiences respond. Now, the biggest drop in the top 10 for the weekend was When the Bough Breaks, with 61%, which, though, to be fair, was the exact same second weekend drop for The Perfect Guy and No Good Deed. Very similar pictures, which opened at the exact same time for the last 2 years. But those pictures opened bigger, so When the Bough Breaks really kind of needed a stronger second weekend hold to stay in the same league as those other films. All the other drops, though, were nice and small, particularly with Suicide Squad, which fell just 18% in its seventh weekend. And now globally, it's up to 719 million. That's excellent. It'll be very interesting to see where it lands finally. Although, speaking of final tallies, domestically, it's getting awfully close to Batman v Superman. Shockingly close, considering one movie has the DC Trinity and the other has DC villains. And I know they're kind of anti-heroes in Suicide Squad, but still, some characters did some pretty horrible things, like Amanda Waller, for instance. And so I would think that the success that DC has had here with their villains league, so to speak, might maybe inspire Marvel to do a little bit of a better job with their villains when they see how much money can be made. Like maybe Marvel plays up their villains, although Marvel's, they have some strong villains, like, let's say Dr. Doom, although they don't have the rights to him currently, the film rights. But, with the success that Vincent D'Onofrio has experienced on the small screen over at Netflix with Wilson Fisk, aka Kingpin, maybe all of this stuff together will make Marvel go, maybe we could be doing a better job there. I liked the recent joke in Honest Trailers that Marvel characters have to fight each other every movie because they don't have good villains. And I think that to some degree that's true. All right, so that's the weekend box office. As for this coming weekend, The Magnificent Seven is set to open with 49 million. And if it does that, if it just gets above like 43 million, it will be the biggest opening of Denzel Washington's career. So right there, it will have done a lot for his career, no matter how the film does after that. So that would be amazing. I would also, I think, potentially be a nice feather in Chris Pratt's cap, and very encouraging for Sony in the upcoming Passengers film with Chris Pratt opposite Jennifer Lawrence. If that ever comes out because of its legal problems with the whole visual effects situation. But then Storks is set to open and also do pretty darn well, showing that late September is also a good animation date. Hotel Transylvania for Sony has taken that twice for both pictures and done quite well. Storks from Warner Brothers isn't expected to do quite as well as the Hotel Transylvania movies, but those are holiday films, for Halloween. But still, I think that while February has become a big animation date, you might see the same happen to late September as well if this does indeed come to pass. All right, that's the weekend box office. Thanks so much for going over this with me. I look forward to continuing the conversation down below, and you can check out some more videos right now.